Hello everyone, and welcome to Audio Description, Seeing Video Game Narrative Through Sound. I am SightlessKombat. I am a gamer without sight and accessibility consultant. So it's completely understandable as to why I'm here. Now this is only a short talk, unfortunately, so I can't go through my whole career, which includes beating Halo via co-op as a franchise and Gears 5 via Copilot, amongst other things. But if you want to hear more about those, as well as tales of daring do on the Sea of Thieves, amongst many other things, you can come and find me afterwards. So what is audio description? Actually, I'm going to first clarify what a gamer without sight is. So essentially, when I say I'm a gamer without sight, I mean that I have absolutely no sight whatsoever, and I use the term, you might be thinking, well, you're blind, aren't you? Well, yes, that's technically correct, but I use the term gamer without sight to clarify that legal blindness, whilst often just shortened to being blind, can and often does include usable and/or residual vision, which I've never had. Now, with that out of the way, what is audio description? Audio description is a very common thing in TV, film, and theatre, where essentially you overlay a second track of audio over the top of everything else, and that audio track has a voice in it that is scripted to describe visual actions and facial expressions, things that you wouldn't be able to discern without having any sight in the first place. Now, to illustrate how this works, well, actually, I'll just say as well, it's not just film, TV, and theatre. So, if I go to the cinema, I can see a film audio described. If I go to buy a DVD at a shop, it's normally got audio description on it, if it's one of the latest releases. And even adverts are audio described now. Allegedly, porn sites are even getting in on the action. But back to a gaming note, for a really cool highlight milestone in audio description happened earlier this year when Microsoft's E3 2019 briefing was audio described for the first time on Mixer, which was amazing to be part, or to sort of sit back and watch. And of course, they're improving it as well as they go on with Inside Xbox, which has audio description. But I've done enough talking on what audio description is, and I haven't actually shown you what it is. So here's a little clip from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Night. The rippling waters of Hogwarts Lake are surrounded by dark mountains. On the far side, a white marble tomb on a tiny island. A large marble block slides back, and two supports beneath it tumble away. The Dark Lord Voldemort leans down into the tomb. He gazes at the black Elder Wand in his hand and thrusts up his arm. A massive force of energy shoots from the tip of the wand, illuminating the dark sky.
Yep, I know that cuts off rather quickly, but I think you understand, for those of you who can see it, that without sight, you wouldn't really get anything from that if that secondary voice wasn't there. That's a real problem in terms of, you would just hear the loud sort of electrical thunderclap at the end, and it would just be like, well, what happened there? That doesn't make any sense. So, if film is doing it, if TV is doing it, if adverts are doing it, why aren't video games doing it? After all, the cutscenes are essentially mini movies, and there's so much that can be gained from understanding the world, understanding the characters, and you can really get into a game by immersing yourself in the story. Allow me to shamelessly plug the Transcribing Games project, a project that I am the founder of, and there's also, it's a community-driven project, essentially, which I started sort of last year and got into working on in earnest this year, really. It came into its own this year. And it seeks to, in its simplest form, add audio description to video game footage via pre-recorded editing and such. The main thing we've done is a guide for God of War. We've been working on that. That's been a really cool project. The scripts are all being written by the community and recorded by mostly by the project, what's her title? Project coordinator in the States, Jenna, who may or may not be watching this presentation. But she does a lot of the AD voice work for it. But to give you an idea of what actually goes into these community projects, because it's not just God of War we're working on as a guide. To give you an idea of what goes into it, I'm going to show you a clip that I've put together specifically for this. So this is a cutscene from Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and I'm going to get you all to close your eyes, and if you don't feel comfortable with that, please just bear with me while I show this. and I want to see how much you can get without actually looking at the screen while I play this. So 3, 2, 1.
Marcus, you've got to drop that data right now!
You still have it?
Hell yeah, I do. Right here.
Whoa!
Engage!
Yeah, so you can all open your eyes now. And how much did you get out of that? How many of you actually got sort of all of the information in that scene? Probably none of you, because there are definitely parts of that that I wouldn't have known, had I not worked on this mock-up as an example of how this all works. So where do we go from here? Once we have this scene, where do we go? So we have the first dialogue stage here. For those of you who can't see this, there's a bunch of wording up on the screen, which includes timestamps, and it's basically a rough transcript of the scene based on a pre-existing video that I actually found to show the very kind volunteer who wrote this, what cutscene I was going to be using for this presentation. So the timestamps, for instance, are 35:05, and that's one of the lines of dialogue. And with that, that's just for me to have a reference point to work from when I'm recording all the description and to know where the scene starts if I were to use that particular video as a base point. There's also an unknown character marked on that list as well, an unknown individual delivering a line of dialogue. Now, that's not so much a problem for me because I was aware of who that character was, but when you're working through this, it's always good to have an idea of who the characters are who are actually speaking. But essentially, that's where we start. We start with a rough idea of the dialogue and everything as it collates to the scene. And then we have the first format pass. Given that transcribing games as a project is an online resource, not only putting together the videos like the one you're going to see shortly, but also textual information, which I will come to in a moment, I have to start converting it into HTML. So for those of you who can't see it, there's essentially much the same wording as before with a few tweaks and removal of the timestamps with HTML code to indicate, amongst other things, paragraphs and headings. Now, from there, where does this go? Well, it goes to the final script stage. This is an example of what a final script looks like. We've had to split this shot up into two because there was so much information. That's because what you actually see in the final script isn't just the scene that you're going to see in a minute, once it's been sort of converted to have AD, actually audio description or AD, put with it. But you will also notice that there are character descriptions, there are weapon descriptions, and with the character as well, in this case being General Ram, there's actually references to both his appearance in the original game, in the original Gears of War, released back in 2006, and in Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which released nearly a decade later, pretty much. And those things can be important depending on what version of the game you're watching, and that kind of thing, really increases the amount of immersion you get and understanding you get of the character as well. So what I'm going to show you now is the final version of this scene. I reckon you're all probably ready to see it in its final form, as it were. So if you want to close your eyes and see how much you get as a gamer without sight with this, feel free to do so. So everybody ready? 3, 2, 1.
Marcus, you've got to drop that data right now!
You still have it?
Hell yeah, I do. Right here.
Marcus and Dom crouch behind cover. General Ram raises one hand as he stands within a swirling mass of krill.
Whoa!
Engage!
Inside a Raven, Cole turns on a light, shining it directly at Ram. The krill disperse. Vaulting a ledge to face Dom and Marcus, the General hefts a troika in both hands. So, a massively different experience in terms of actual understanding. And yes, if you're wondering, that was me doing the audio description for that. I sat down for a little while, recorded the lines, and put it all together myself, and then got feedback from my fellow Transcribing Games project contributors as to whether I needed to change anything. Now, that's just, this is a community effort. Developers are actually sometimes getting on board. We recently had input from Sony and Guerrilla Games to legally license use of the script for Horizon Zero Dawn to do an audio an audio described guide for that, similar to what we're doing with God of War, which is still in the works at the moment. So when videos come out for that, they will become available on my YouTube channel and on the Transcribing Games page. Now, what can developers do to actually start implementing things that will help in, if not in an identical way, then in a similar manner? We come to native audio description, or native AD for short. This is simply where the information that would be conveyed visually in terms of cutscenes, story, sort of story segments, or text or anything like that is conveyed with a narrated equivalent. So what I'm going to use as the example, Ian Hamilton mentioned it earlier, quite fortuitously really, is Sequence Storm. Now this is the beginning of one of the missions. There are no real spoilers in this one though, and it's a very short sequence. So I'm going to play the version without the menu narration feature turned on. So 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so as you can tell, that is just a load of beeps and boops, essentially, when you can't see it and when there's no narration. That's a real problem because the entire story is conveyed like that, other than during races which involve gameplay, though none of the story is voice acted, and during races you still get these text things coming across the screen to explain what's going on. Now, when you turn the narration on, this is what happens.
Story screen. Sky says, I think I've got time for one more. Elijah says, yeah, I'm getting tired too. Sky says, and little Azhar is going to be waking up soon. Elijah says, oh, are you sure you've got time? Sky says, oh, yeah, it's no problem.
And that's a massive difference. That's, again, huge difference from, an indie game as well. That's the key thing. It's a small team in the sense of, there's the amount of effort that's been put into this, definitely shows in terms of the benefit it gives. And, I hope, if you want to ask questions about, potential projects where you might want to include this or any, ideas you've had about putting it in and you're not sure where to start, or anything else about Gaming Without Sight, feel free to come and find me. And there will be links after this as well to my social channels and to the Transcribing Games project as well. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have time, any questions?